This is called the douchebag jar. If I say anything disrespectful, I have to put money in the jar.
What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we're here to talk about Smash Mouth, a band that, if you are a human being with functioning ears, you have heard literally thousands of times in your life. You may know their signature song All Star from the movie Shrek, or maybe from memes like this or this. Or maybe from your local baseball team playing All-Star in between innings. Honestly, there are probably very few songs that are more recognizable than that one, because ever since it came out back in 1999, it has been playing pretty much non-stop at karaoke nights and commercials, at Target. It's basically inescapable, pretty much anywhere. And despite the song being basically inescapable, they're still one of the most widely known and almost universally beloved bands of all time. I mean, how could you say anything bad about the band that brought you All-Star?
Up next, I interview a rock and roll band. Once in a generation, a band comes along, moves our souls, and changes how we look at life. That band is the Beatles. But tonight I interview Smash Mouth.
But unfortunately, there's also been some dark times in the world of Smash Mouth. First, signs that they deeply resented the idea of being the quote-unquote Shrek band, and later, their founding vocalist Steve Harwell clearly battling some very serious issues that forced him to ultimately leave the band. So what is the truth behind Smash Mouth's success with All-Star? Are they just a meme band, or is there something more to it than that? And will their story have a happy ending? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. And also, I would like to thank Factor for sponsoring this video. If you're busy with summer plans and you still want to eat well, and you should, then check out Factor. And they make nutritious, chef-prepared meals delivered straight to your door that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. That means you can skip the trip to the grocery store and all the chopping and prep and cleanup and all that, while still getting the flavor and nutrition that you need. And if you eat out a lot, it's also a great way to save money. It's much cheaper than takeout and way cheaper than delivery, which I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, that is just a complete ripoff, a total waste of money. And they have a ton of options like Calorie Smart, which is less than 550 calories per serving, or Protein Plus, which has over 30 grams of protein. They've also got vegan and veggie, and their fancy new surf and turf options. Personally, I love that I don't have to think about what to make for lunch. I know that I can just go downstairs, grab something out of the fridge, and I know that it's going to taste good and that I'm going to hit my macro goals. So if you want to check out Factor, and I genuinely think you should, head to factor75.com or click the link in the description and use the code PUNK50 to get 50% off your first Factor box.
I'm not sure how we got here, but let's party!
Before Shrek and all the memes, Smash Mouth's singer Steve Harwell was actually in a rap group called FOS that kind of sounded like Cypress Hill. Eventually, he got together with the rest of the band, and Smash Mouth started in 1994 as kind of a ska punk band, very much in line with the other ska-core bands at the time, like No Doubt, Goldfinger, and Real Big Fish. But after a couple years, the band was already on the verge of collapse. They'd been together for years, putting in all this work with basically zero traction to show for it, and they were kind of questioning, why are we even doing this? As their bassist said, in our hometown in San Jose, we weren't a very popular band. We didn't have crowds. But that all changed when they self-released their song Walkin' on the Sun, thanks to none other than Carson Daly, who, as many of you know, would go on to be the host of MTV's TRL.
Hang out with some great guests. Ashton Kutcher from That 70s Show, Blink, Smash Mouth. They're throwing a party later. We're going to cruise all over.
As their guitarist and primary songwriter Greg Camp described it, the song got onto the radio before we got a record deal, actually, because we were buddies with Carson Daly back when he was just a lowly San Jose alternative rock DJ. He liked the song and started playing it, and then he quickly moved to K-Rock and he brought that song along with him. So they put it into rotation on K-Rock in LA. The next day, every record company in the world was calling. And it turns out that the label's interest in that song was justified. It quickly went to #1 on multiple different rock charts in several different countries, and they had officially made it out of San Jose.
In just 9 months, our next guests have become a huge success. Their debut CD there has gone double platinum. Here they are, Cutie Patooties, Smash Mouth.
And what's interesting is that the song was actually much darker than it sounds. It was originally written after the LA riots of 1992, which happened after several police officers were caught on tape brutally beating a man named Rodney King. As Greg Camp said, the song was basically a social and racial battle cry. And I'm like, God, what is going on? It's like we might as well be walking around a planet on fire.
As a week of pretrial motions ended today in the case of the 4 Los Angeles policemen already indicted in the Rodney King beating, the county grand jury signaled that will be the extent of the criminal case.
And the point that I want to make here is that although Smash Mouth has always seemed like this kind of happy-go-lucky band that you might hear in an Old Navy commercial, and to some extent they are that, but there's always been this kind of undercurrent of darkness in the band that I think a lot of people haven't noticed. And with the success of Walking on the Sun, their debut album quickly went platinum, and they got a song placed in the Kevin Bacon movie Wild Things. And the band was initially thrilled with their success because, I mean, who wouldn't be? They sold 2 million albums. But that feeling didn't last for long. As their bassist said, all we heard was one-hit wonder, they're done, that's it. Critics didn't like us, which personally I think is ridiculous because how is being a one-hit wonder a bad thing? Isn't that better than the literally 99.999% of artists who are 0-hit wonders? But regardless of what I think, that is just not how the music industry works. They always want more. And so they recorded their second album and turned it into the label with the intention of that being the finished product. But the label didn't see it that way. Here is how Greg described one of their label meetings with the legendary Jimmy Iovine, who was their A&R, and you may also know as one of the co-founders of Beats with Dr. Dre. I remember Jimmy Iovine almost laying on a couch, like on a sofa in his office with his stereo next to him with a big volume knob on it and him just like blasting the music. And he would only turn it down long enough to say something and then turn it all the way back up so you couldn't respond. He'd turn it down and go, "Where's the chorus?" and then turn it all the way back up. And so a very frustrated Greg went back into the studio with the goal of writing that hit that the label was looking for, which is an incredibly hard thing to do, right? Like you can't just say, I'm going to go write a hit and then expect to actually do that, right?
Let's make it the goal to make a hit song. Let's try to actually make it the biggest song.
Which means I think a takeaway from this experiment is don't ever try to create a hit.
But in this case, that is exactly what happened. And as soon as the band heard it, they knew what they had. Their vocalist, Steve Harwell, describes that moment. I said, this is like a smash. This is going to be life-changing. And we knew it. I knew it right away. And as we all now know, they were right. The song was a hit almost overnight and has sold over 5 million copies, as well as being immortalized in countless memes.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
But here's where the story gets really interesting, and buckle up because it gets pretty weird and a little bit dark. The first thing we have to talk about is, of course, Shrek. As I'm sure most of you know, All Star was featured in the opening credits to the movie.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
And Shrek ended up being the biggest movie of that year, especially with kids. It spawned 2 sequels and a spin-off. And so for a lot of people, they are the Shrek band. But the band seems to have a big problem with that. For years, they've been kind of going out of their way to clap back at people on Twitter anytime they're labeled as the Shrek band. And just to be clear, as far as I'm aware, until 2021, I believe that the Smash Mouth Twitter account was run by Steve Harwell. And to be fair, he is right. The song hit #1 on the mainstream pop charts and #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1999, 2 full years before Shrek came out. But at the same time, you have to think, who cares? Why are you going at just random people on Twitter over this pretty insignificant thing? It's also interesting to me that the band, or at least Steve, seem to have such a big problem with being tied to the Shrek movies, when at the same time, they've been incredibly aggressive over the years about licensing their music to pretty much anybody from Gatorade to Jeep to Buick to Pepsi, and even personally appearing in commercials for brands like Tostitos and Progressive.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Progressive Commercial Halftime Show. Smash Mouth.
And to be fair to them, I think all of that was coming from their manager, who made all those deals happen, such as getting $1.5 million from Nissan to use one of their songs in this kind of strange commercial. But as their manager pointed out in an interview, this wasn't just about money, although they did get a lot of money from these deals. This was about marketing the band as well. I've had All Star do a tie-in with Mystery Men, and a snippet of All Star was played before every Star Wars Episode 1, which is millions of people seeing Star Wars. More people watch TV than listen to the radio. Every night you're watching a show, then it's Jesus Christ, there's that fucking Smash Mouth song again. And so I get where they're coming from, but to me, you can't have it both ways. You can't say yes to all these deals that made you rich and famous, and then at the same time, get butthurt at people who think of you as the band from Shrek or the Gatorade commercial. Because honestly, that's what you are.
Just go to PepsiStuff.com and enter the code under the Pepsi cap to choose from over 500 music downloads from bands like Smash Mouth.
But that is not all. The band's official Twitter account, which again, as far as I know, was run by Steve Harwell, started attacking a random Bay Area sports reporter as well as the Oakland A's account on Twitter after they had what he felt was a disappointing season. And it eventually got ugly enough that the A's even posted an apology just to sort of extend an olive branch and make the whole thing go away. And you have to wonder what those conversations were like in the A's marketing department. They're like, the guy from Smash Mouth seems to really, really hate us. What do we do about this? They also made some really bizarre tribute tweets to celebrities who had recently died, like when they tweeted RIP Carrie Fisher with a picture of her with the Smash Mouth logo on it, which was just really strange. I'm still totally unclear on what they meant by that. They also did the one thing that everybody knows you just do not ever do. They antagonized the Swifties by just kind of out of the blue calling Taylor Swift's new album Folklore Borelore.
I have this thing where I get older, but just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons.
And we can't forget about the incredibly bizarre egg incident. To make a long and very, very weird story short, a writer for the legendary website Something Awful, who goes by the amazing @fart handle on Twitter, just kind of randomly said once that it would be cool if the guy from Smash Mouth would eat 24 eggs for charity. He just said this as kind of a shit post, but then other people thought it was funny and they said that they would donate 2 to make it happen. Then Guy Fieri, of all people, got involved. One thing led to another, and eventually we got the just truly insane fever dream moment of watching the singer of Smash Mouth eat eggs while Guy Fieri and @fart from Something Awful cheer him on.
I get drug into the weirdest things. You hang out with Steve from Smash Mouth and he puts you in the weirdest situations here.
All of which is kind of funny, and maybe you could just chalk all of that up to being a guy who just doesn't really understand how the internet works. But when you consider all the other odd behavior from the Smash Mouth singer, it starts to get a little concerning. The main thing being that over the years, there were several incidents where it appeared that he was very, very drunk on stage. For example, when he lashed out at the crowd way back in 2015.
You throw one more piece of shit on fucking stage, I'm gonna come find your ass. I'm gonna beat your ass.
Those maybe you could say were kind of funny, but most recently in 2021, he appeared to be just totally out of control in a way that was not funny at all. It was honestly just sad and hard to watch.
Kill your whole family. It was like this football dick I never leave the house.
And shortly after that, Steve announced his retirement from the band due to health issues, including a neurological condition that is oftentimes associated with alcohol abuse. And the band is still together with a new vocalist, but without Steve and their primary songwriter. In the minds of most people, that was effectively the end of Smash Mouth. Which brings us to a couple of questions that personally I think are pretty interesting. First of all, what happened? How did Smash Mouth of all bands end up in such a sad place? I obviously don't know anybody in the band, so I'm completely speculating here. But to me, a lot of this comes down to the inherent tension between art and money, or at least art and commerce. To put it bluntly, they had a huge song and they all got rich, but at what cost? One interesting thing to me is that for as much as All Star is kind of synonymous with sports, that's actually not what the song is about at all. It's actually intended as kind of a pep talk to their fans who were most decidedly not jocks. As Greg Camp said, this is the guy who actually wrote All Star, these were kids that weren't really wearing a uniform in any certain way. They weren't mods, they weren't punks, they weren't jocks, they weren't sportos. They were just these kids that liked music, saying that they got picked on a lot. I sort of verbally set out to write an anthem for them. So to have that song used as essentially a jock anthem, well, you could imagine that that might be kind of a bummer to him. And as for the rest of the band who were huge sports fans, that may not have bothered them, but being defined as this kind of goofy meme band that's synonymous with a kids movie probably did. And to be clear, I'm not saying that we should feel sorry for the multimillionaires, because honestly we shouldn't, but I think we can recognize that most people start out making music to say something, to make art. And at some point, if your art is just reduced to ironic Shrek memes, no matter how grateful you are for your success, at some point it's still going to weigh on you that your art isn't taken seriously.
Turn that off. You might as well be walking on the sun.
I think Steve Harwell put it perfectly in an interview from back in 2005. Being a guy with tattoos, 38 years old, and thought of as a punk rocker to end up on Nickelodeon is kind of weird. Everyone's got kids and families, it's all good, but I think there comes a time where you say, is this what we want, or is this what everyone else wants? So what's the lesson here? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. If anything, I guess it's just that sometimes you can fly too close to the sun. And I'm not sure what Steve Harwell is doing now, but I do hope that he's doing better.
I'm going to read the Bible right now.
You need every ounce of that Bible.
I'm Joel Osteen, okay? When I want to be.
All right, friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments, and I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts and videos early. I do giveaways. There are members-only channels in my Discord that I'm super active in, and there's a way to have me review your music. So if any of that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.